3 years ago, I had everything a man could want. Now I know it was everything another man wanted to take. I remember the exact moment my life split in two. Not when I discovered the affair, that came later, but the instant I should have known something was wrong. We were on Blake's yacht, Miami's skyline glittering against the night like diamonds scattered on black velvet. I'd just closed the Harrington deal, $4.3 million in luxury vehicles for his corporate fleet. Everyone was celebrating my success, glasses raised in the warm ocean breeze. I was searching for Melissa, wanting to share this moment with my wife. When I finally spotted her on the lower deck, she was laughing with Blake, my boss. There was nothing overtly inappropriate, just a hand lingering too long on her bare shoulder, heads tilted slightly too close. But something in their body language sent a chill through me despite the humid Miami night. Their eyes met with a familiarity that felt practiced. Then they saw me watching. Blake's hand dropped. Melissa's smile shifted into something brighter but somehow less authentic, and that moment of unguarded intimacy vanished like it never existed. "There he is, the man of the hour," Blake boomed, raising his crystal tumbler of scotch. "To Ethan Reynolds, the hungriest salesman in the business." I should have trusted that chill. But when you've clawed your way up from nothing, when you've finally secured your place in a world that once seemed unreachable, you become frighteningly good at ignoring warning signs. I'm Ethan Reynolds. 3 years ago, I was the golden boy at Atlantic Luxury Motors in Miami, senior sales director with a corner office, married to a stunning event planner, living in a Brickell high-rise with views that took your breath away. My boss, Blake Wilson, was more than my mentor. He was what I aspired to become: powerful, respected, wealthy enough to make problems disappear with a single phone call. What I couldn't see then was that I wasn't just Blake's protege. I was his blueprint, the life he was methodically copying, improving, and planning to claim for himself. Growing up in a double-wide in rural Georgia, watching my mother work 3 jobs after my father left, I promised myself I'd create a life so secure it could never be taken from me. The ultimate irony? I built that life with such single-minded focus that I never noticed when someone else started dismantling it piece by piece. This isn't just another story about infidelity. It's about identity theft in its most personal form. The calculated, systematic way 2 people hollowed out the life I'd built while smiling to my face every single day. I met Melissa during a charity gala where I'd volunteered to pour drinks, hoping to network with Miami's elite. I couldn't afford a ticket, but I knew opportunities didn't come to men like me. I had to create them. She approached the bar in a blue dress that matched her eyes, asked for champagne, and smiled when I admitted I was just a car salesman working my way up. "At least you're honest," she said. "That's refreshing in Miami." 2 weeks later, we had our first date at a Cuban place in Little Havana. She was from a comfortable Connecticut family, educated at prestigious schools, connected to people whose names appeared in the society pages. I was from nowhere, nobody, nothing, except determined. Our early years were a montage of small victories and shared dreams. When Atlantic Motors recruited me from the Honda dealership where I'd been setting records, Melissa jumped into my arms. "This is it, baby. The big leagues." I became their top performer within months. People don't understand what high-end car sales really is. It's emotional alchemy. You're not selling transportation, you're selling validation, identity, the story someone tells themselves and others. I could read people instantly. The newly divorced man needing to reclaim his masculinity, the entrepreneur desperate to signal her arrival, the old money wanting discretion, the new money demanding recognition. My success came at a price. I missed dinners, anniversaries, came home at midnight to find Melissa already asleep. "It's for our future," became my mantra. She stopped complaining eventually, which I mistook for understanding. Blake Wilson entered our lives like a benevolent hurricane. 52 with perfectly silvered temples, tailored suits that cost more than my monthly rent, a mansion in Coral Gables, and a 60-foot yacht called Vindication. He'd been through 2 divorces that taught him what matters in life, though I never questioned what those lessons might actually be. "Reynolds? he said after I broke the monthly sales record my second month. You remind me of myself 20 years ago. Raw talent. Hunger. I'm going to take you under my wing. His attention was intoxicating. Invitations to elite gatherings. Introductions to Miami's power players. When you've spent your life as an outsider, being welcomed by the ultimate insider feels like validation of your entire existence. The yacht parties became our weekend ritual. Blake insisted I bring Melissa. In our business, the right partner is essential, he'd say. Beautiful, sophisticated, charming. Your wife elevates your entire brand. I was too busy networking, making connections, working the room to notice how Blake's eyes followed Melissa's every movement. Too preoccupied with prospects to see how they'd disappear below deck for a tour and return 40 minutes later, her lipstick slightly smudged. Too focused on my ascent to question why Blake suddenly knew intimate details about our marriage, like our fertility struggles after my motorcycle accident, something I'd only discussed with Melissa in private. The first undeniable warning came during a company retreat in the Keys. Melissa casually mentioned Blake's childhood summers in Maine, his mother's battle with early-onset Alzheimer's, the scar on his back from a sailing accident. Deeply personal details I didn't know despite working alongside him daily. When I asked how she knew these things, her answer seemed rehearsed. Oh, he mentioned it when he was showing me photos of his new boat design. Too specific. Too ready. The unease intensified when Melissa began attending charity events where Blake served on the board. It's networking for my business, she'd explain, coming home at 2 a.m. smelling of cologne I didn't wear. I should have confronted her then, but confrontation meant potentially disrupting the life I'd worked so relentlessly to build. So I did what ambitious people often do when faced with inconvenient truths. I focused harder on work, drowning my suspicions in 60-hour weeks and record-breaking sales. How many times do we ignore the obvious because acknowledging it would require actions we're not prepared to take? How often do we accelerate toward goals to avoid facing what's disintegrating behind us? March 27th. The date is tattooed on my soul. I was home unexpectedly. A client had canceled last minute. Our cleaning service had rearranged things and I couldn't find an important contract. While searching Melissa's desk, I discovered a second phone hidden in her locked drawer. My hands trembled so badly I could barely enter the passcode I'd seen her use on her regular phone. When the screen unlocked, time stopped. Hundreds of messages between her and B, explicit photos, video clips that made me physically ill, calendar entries with hotel information going back 11 months. He suspects nothing, Melissa had written just the previous night. Too obsessed with making President's Circle to notice what's happening right in front of him. Blake's response: that's why he's perfect. His ambition blinds him completely. Meanwhile, I get to enjoy everything he thinks he owns. They weren't just sleeping together. They were actively mocking my dedication, my trust, my work ethic. Each late night I spent closing deals had provided them another opportunity. Each business trip had been exploited. My marriage and career had been weaponized against me simultaneously. I discovered their entire system. Langford client meeting was code for the Four Seasons on Wednesday afternoons. Foundation review meant their weekends together when I traveled for sales conferences. Phase 3 referred to their plans after Blake's upcoming promotion to the Northeastern Regional Headquarters. When I checked her regular email, I found their longer-term strategy laid bare. Divorce asset protection, relocating for partner's job, how to end marriage without financial penalties. They weren't just betraying me, they were methodically erasing me from my own future. I was compiling evidence, planning my response, when Blake called me into his office the following Monday. Miami sunshine streamed through his floor-to-ceiling windows, creating that golden aura he so carefully cultivated. Reynolds, excellent news. He beamed, casually adjusting his Patek Philippe watch, the same model I'd mentioned wanting when I made regional director. I've recommended you as my replacement when I move to the Northeast Territory next month. The promotion is practically guaranteed. All while sleeping with my wife. All while systematically undermining my client relationships. All while planning to dismantle my marriage once he'd extracted maximum value from my professional contributions. I sat there, nodding, smiling, thanking the architect of my destruction. Do you know what that feels like? To congratulate the man who's excavating your life from the inside out? To shake the hand that's stabbing you in the back? My performance in that office, the eager protege, the grateful employee, was the best acting of my life. Inside, something primal was clawing to get out. Something that wanted to vault across his imported Italian desk and show Blake Wilson exactly what happens when you mistake someone's professional restraint for weakness. Instead, I smiled and said words that carried a weight he couldn't yet comprehend. I won't disappoint you, Blake. You can count on that. That night, while Melissa attended a charity planning session, with Blake according to the hidden phone's calendar, I executed what I now call the reclamation. I contacted Mira Patel, a cybersecurity specialist who'd purchased a Bentley from me the previous year. Legally questionable? Perhaps. Essential for survival? Absolutely. Within 24 hours, I had access to Blake's corporate email, cloud storage, and financial records. What I uncovered transformed my personal catastrophe into something far larger. The first discovery. Blake had been steering high-net-worth Atlantic Motors clients to Melissa's event planning business in exchange for a 40% kickback. Over $380,000 in fraudulent business arrangements using the dealership's proprietary client information, a clear violation of corporate policy and Florida business statutes. The second revelation, Blake had been systematically manipulating performance metrics, claiming partial credit for my largest deals to inflate his own numbers. Detailed spreadsheets showed how he'd created a shadow accounting system to misrepresent results to corporate headquarters, securing bonuses and advancement at my expense. But the third discovery shattered something fundamental inside me. I found recordings, actual audio files of them discussing me. Blake. Reynolds is the perfect mark. Completely self-made, so he has no safety net, no family connections to fall back on. His entire identity is wrapped up in his professional success and his marriage. When we pull both out from under him, Melissa's laugh in response triggered something primal in my chest. The funny part is how hard he works to give me this lifestyle. The late nights, the missed vacations, he's literally funding the life I'll have with you. I vomited into my trash can. This wasn't mere infidelity or workplace sabotage. This was methodical psychological warfare. They weren't just hurting me incidentally while pursuing their relationship. They were actively targeting me, analyzing my vulnerabilities, exploiting my dedication while mockingly accepting my sacrifices. The unique agony of betrayal isn't just the acts themselves. It's discovering that people you genuinely loved viewed your loyalty as stupidity, your trust as weakness, your dedication as an exploitable resource rather than something to honor. I spent 15 days gathering evidence, creating secure backups, building an airtight case. I didn't want simple revenge. I wanted justice, professional, personal, and complete. I wanted to reclaim agency in a situation where I'd been systematically stripped of power and dignity. The confrontations were strategically separated by 36 hours, maximum impact with minimal opportunity for collusion. I intercepted Melissa returning from a donor meeting at 11:45 p.m. Our dining table was covered with evidence, hotel receipts, text transcripts, location data, explicit photos, and financial documentation of the kickback scheme. Her face cycled through expressions, shock, fear, calculation, and finally, most devastatingly, relief that the pretense could end. "How long?" I asked with unnatural calm. "Were you planning to stay before the extraction?" She sat across from me, not attempting denial. "After your promotion was finalized. We didn't want to jeopardize Blake's advancement package, which needed your sales numbers to secure approval. They were waiting for me to help cement Blake's promotion before discarding me, using me until my utility expired. 10 years of marriage reduced to a business transaction with an expiration date. She actually said they had a once-in-a-lifetime connection, as if recasting their betrayal as some cosmic romantic event somehow sanctified it. As if connection justified the conspiracy, the contempt, the callous exploitation of my trust. Then came the revelation that still visits me in nightmares. "There's something else you should know," she said, strangely composed now that pretense had fallen away. The mysterious donor who saved your mother's house during the foreclosure crisis? That was Blake. The room seemed to tilt beneath me. What are you talking about? He identified us as valuable early on, said helping your mother was an investment in our future. He's been positioning himself in our lives for years, Ethan. My mother's home, saved by an anonymous business angel during the financial crisis when I couldn't yet afford to help, had been Blake. The first move in an elaborate, years-long strategy where my entire life, even my family's security, had been manipulated. The next morning, I walked into Atlantic Motors with the company's general counsel, head of security, and 3 executives from corporate headquarters. Blake's expression when I methodically presented the kickback documentation, the sales manipulation evidence, and the affair evidence including recordings. That moment is photographically preserved in my memory. His carefully constructed persona, respected business leader, mentor, friend, dissolved into something reptilian and desperate. He attempted to reframe the narrative, suggesting I had fabricated evidence because I'd discovered his genuine relationship with Melissa. Vanessa Ortega, the company's steel-spined CEO who had built Atlantic from nothing, silenced him with a raised hand. Security will escort you to collect personal items only. Legal proceedings regarding the financial irregularities begin tomorrow. 10 years of marriage, 5 years at that company, obliterated in 48 hours. This is where many would disintegrate entirely, where such comprehensive betrayal would destroy them beyond recovery. Part of me did break, spectacularly and completely. But another part, a dormant, primal self I hadn't accessed since fighting my way out of poverty, was just beginning to emerge from the wreckage. Blake was terminated with immediate effect. Corporate security escorted him from the building while IT specialists revoked his access codes and remotely wiped company devices. Atlantic Motors moved swiftly to contain the scandal, offering me Blake's position with a substantial compensation increase, equity options, and a company-owned property. Vanessa Ortega herself extended the offer. You've been wronged professionally and personally, Ethan. Let us make this right. But how could I remain? The showroom where I'd once moved confidently now felt like a crime scene. Every colleague's glance carried speculation about exactly what Melissa and Blake had done, where, and for how long. The once prestigious Atlantic Motors logo now looked to me like a warning sign I'd failed to heed. Melissa vacated our condo within days, taking only personal possessions. Her attorney, a predatory type in designer suits, initially demanded half our assets, including my pending performance bonus. Mrs. Reynolds supported her husband's career advancement throughout their marriage, she argued, seemingly blind to the irony. I retained James Morales, a divorce attorney whose reputation made other lawyers physically step back when he entered courtrooms. He weaponized the infidelity evidence, the corporate kickback scheme, and Blake's financial manipulation. The resulting settlement was devastatingly one-sided in my favor. Melissa didn't contest it, likely because Blake had promised to compensate her losses. The most excruciating aspect wasn't losing them. It was losing my identity. Who was Ethan Reynolds without his successful marriage? Without his mentor? Without the carefully constructed professional image he'd sacrificed everything to build? Just a fraud, a target, a stepping stone in someone else's narrative. My physical deterioration was alarming. Clinical insomnia, never more than 2 hours of sleep before jolting awake, heart pounding, sheets drenched. Couldn't stomach food beyond protein shakes. Lost 48 pounds in 10 weeks. Developed panic attacks triggered by specific stimuli, the scent of Melissa's perfume that still clung to our closet, the particular tone that announced Blake's messages, the sight of any silver Mercedes like the one he drove. You believe you understand devastating heartbreak from books or films until you experience it firsthand. It's not merely emotional, it's a whole-body assault. Your immune system weakens. Cognitive function declines. Your nervous system exists in perpetual fight or flight. Betrayal doesn't just break your heart, it colonizes your entire being. Rock bottom arrived exactly 17 weeks after the confrontations. I sat alone in our half-empty condo. Melissa had taken furniture despite the settlement, Surrounded by moving boxes, drinking 23-year-old Macallan straight from the crystal decanter Blake had given me when I broke the yearly sales record. I found our wedding video, masochistically pressed play. There was Blake raising his glass, delivering his best man toast. To my friend Ethan and his beautiful bride, may your partnership be as successful as ours will be. The guests laughed, thinking he meant our professional relationship. Now I understood he'd been announcing his intentions all along, hiding them in plain sight behind congratulatory platitudes. The most insidious aspect of profound betrayal is that it doesn't just destroy your present circumstances. It reaches backward, contaminating every memory, calling into question every moment you believed was genuine. It obliterates your capacity to trust, not just others, but your own perceptions, your own judgment. If you were this catastrophically wrong about the two people closest to you, what else might you be mistaken about? Exactly 4 months after the confrontations, I woke up in Mount Sinai Medical Center after driving my Range Rover through a guardrail on the Rickenbacker Causeway. The emergency surgeon, a woman with penetrating eyes and hands steady as stone, asked directly if it had been a suicide attempt. I honestly don't know, I told her. Had my subconscious been seeking escape from unbearable pain? Or was I simply reckless from sleep deprivation and bourbon? Either way, it was my absolute nadir, the lowest point beneath what I'd previously thought was bottom. As I lay there with 4 broken ribs, a shattered collarbone, and a severe concussion, an overnight nurse named Miguel took a moment from his rounds to speak to me. My wife left me for my business partner after 18 years, he said quietly. I drove into a concrete barrier 6 months later. But here I am now, still breathing, still moving forward. This isn't your life's final chapter, Mr. Reynolds. It's just the worst one you'll ever have to read. That moment, 3:47 a.m. in a sterile hospital room with a stranger who somehow understood exactly what I needed to hear, marked the boundary between destruction and the first tentative attempt at reconstruction. I resigned from Atlantic Motors despite the generous promotion and retention package. No salary increase could offset the psychological cost of working in the environment where my personal and professional betrayal had unfolded simultaneously. I sold our Brickell condo with its painful associations and Melissa's lingering presence, liquidated our investment portfolios, cut ties with our social circle, most of whom had witnessed the betrayal without warning me. Some had even facilitated Blake and Melissa's deception by providing alibis and cover stories. I began therapy with Dr. Elena Vasquez, a trauma specialist who worked with combat veterans and survivors of profound betrayal. I'd previously dismissed therapy as an indulgence for those too fragile to face reality independently. Catastrophe has a way of recalibrating your perspective on strength versus vulnerability. Dr. Vasquez asked one question that initiated authentic recovery. Who was Ethan Reynolds before Melissa shaped his personal identity? Before Blake defined his professional worth? Before external validation became his sole measure of value? I couldn't answer. The realization was terrifying. I had no concept of myself outside those defining relationships and achievements. I'd constructed my entire identity around others' expectations and validation. No wonder I'd been so vulnerable to manipulation. I'd outsourced my self-worth to external metrics controlled by others. The rebuilding process proved more excruciating than the destruction. Physical recovery from the accident, psychological recovery from the betrayal, existential recovery from the realization that I'd been complicit in my own undoing by valuing myself only through others' estimation. I started with small, measurable steps, daily journaling, forcing myself to articulate emotions I'd suppressed for years. Physical therapy that evolved into regular swimming, not for appearance, but for the endorphin release that temporarily quieted my hypervigilant nervous system. Reconnecting with college friends I'd neglected during my ascent, friends who knew me before the designer suits and luxury condo. 1 year after my world imploded, I launched Integrity Automotive Consultancy, working with independent luxury dealerships on ethical sales practices and authentic client relationship building. Profound irony, using the very expertise Blake had helped me develop to build something he could never infiltrate or claim credit for. The income was substantially lower than my Atlantic Motors compensation package, but it was entirely mine. No boss to betray me, no corporate hierarchy to navigate, no compromise of my newly discovered values. I purchased a modest Mediterranean-style house in Coconut Grove, significantly less impressive than our condo, but authentically mine in a way no previous residents had been. The overgrown garden became unexpected therapy as I learned to nurture growing things rather than sales numbers. Status symbols that once seemed essential components of my identity, the designer watches, custom suits, VIP access at exclusive clubs, now register as props in a performance I'm relieved to have concluded. The constant striving for external validation had been exhausting in ways I hadn't recognized until freed from its demands. I've cautiously re-entered the dating world, but with dramatically recalibrated priorities. My current relationship with Gabriella, who teaches environmental science at a public high school, would have been inconceivable to my former self. She has zero interest in the trappings of luxury that once defined my concept of success. She wants farmers' markets on Sunday mornings, kayaking at sunset, conversations that extend beyond acquisitions and achievements. Remarkably, I'm more fulfilled by her authenticity than I ever was by Melissa's calculated perfection. Through an industry connection, I learned that Blake and Melissa's relationship disintegrated spectacularly just 5 months after my departure. He apparently reverted to established patterns, beginning an affair with his executive assistant at the Northeast Regional Office. Melissa discovered it when she made a surprise visit to his Boston apartment and found another woman's belongings already integrated into the space. The symmetry of this outcome provided no satisfaction. I was already too far along in my recovery to derive pleasure from their pain. Melissa attempted contact once, noticeably intoxicated, seeking to explain everything and requesting some form of absolution. I realized I no longer required her explanations or apologies. Her power over my emotional state had dissolved entirely. I wished her well, genuinely, and ended the call, feeling nothing beyond mild compassion for someone still trapped in patterns I was actively breaking. The most unexpected development? I'm genuinely grateful for the betrayal now. It demolished a life that appeared impressive externally, but was slowly destroying me internally. It liberated me from relationships constructed on ambition and appearance, rather than authentic connection. It forced me to confront the hollowness at the core of what I had mistaken for success. I retained just one artifact from my previous life, the watch my father gave me when I graduated college, before Blake, before Melissa, before Miami. Not as a reminder of achievement, but as a connection to authentic values I had temporarily abandoned in pursuit of external validation. Through this crucible, I've distilled certain truths that might serve others navigating similar devastation. Trust your instincts without qualification. That persistent discomfort when circumstances feel misaligned? It's your subconscious processing information your conscious mind is actively denying. I ignored mine for months, rationalizing inconsistencies, late nights, subtle behavioral shifts. Your intuition often perceives deception before your rational mind is prepared to acknowledge it. Observe how people treat others, not just you. Blake's failed marriages, his casual disparagement of former employees, his subtle undermining of colleagues. These weren't mere personality quirks. They were previews of how he would eventually treat me when expedient. People reveal their character consistently across relationships. Never allow any single relationship or role to become your entire identity. I had invested everything in being Melissa's husband and Blake's protege. When both relationships collapsed simultaneously, I had no stable foundation. Diversify your sense of self across multiple domains. Relationships, yes, but also values, interests, and communities unrelated to your primary roles. Your worth exists independently of your title, relationship status, or possessions. This represented my greatest challenge. I'd spent my adult life believing I was valuable because of my achievements, possessions, and chosen partnerships. Having everything stripped away forced me to locate value in simply being Ethan, flawed, resilient, authentic. Healing progresses non-linearly. Certain triggers still activate emotional responses. A particular model of Mercedes in my peripheral vision, the specific cologne Blake wore, restaurants where I now know they conducted their affair. Some mornings I wake momentarily disoriented, reaching for Melissa before remembering everything. That's normal. Recovery isn't about eliminating pain. It's about pain no longer determining your choices. I now maintain boundaries that would have seemed paranoid to my former self. I don't combine business with friendship. I don't allow work to invade my personal sanctuary. I regularly check my motivations. Am I pursuing this because I genuinely want it, or to impress someone else? Does this choice align with my values, or am I compromising for external approval? Sometimes those who wound you most profoundly become unwitting catalysts for essential growth. Blake and Melissa inflicted devastating damage, but they also provided the painful gift of forcing me to reconstruct myself with greater awareness, authenticity, and wisdom than before. From complete devastation to intentional reconstruction, this journey represents the most excruciating and transformative experience of my life. Do permanent scars remain? Unquestionably. Trust develops more gradually now. I verify claims rather than accepting them at face value. I protect certain aspects of myself until someone demonstrates consistent trustworthiness. But here's the paradox that occasionally still astonishes me. I'm fundamentally happier now than before the betrayal. Because previously my contentment was constructed upon illusions, the illusion of a faithful wife, a mentoring boss, a meaningful career trajectory. Now my satisfaction derives from truth, from genuine connections, from a life I consciously choose each day rather than one I perform for others' approval. There's unexpected liberation in confronting your worst fears and surviving. Once you've endured what you believed would destroy you completely, ordinary challenges lose their power to intimidate. Being forced to rebuild from absolute devastation clarifies what's genuinely essential. No matter how meticulously crafted your life appears externally, authenticity invariably brings greater peace. The relief of abandoning pretense, of not exhausting yourself maintaining a carefully curated image, represents a freedom I never knew existed until experiencing it. If you're currently enduring betrayal, whether romantic, professional, or both, I can promise with absolute certainty, recovery comes, but rarely in anticipated forms. This isn't your story's conclusion. It's the painful catalyst for a more authentic chapter. The section where you discover strengths previously unknown, values genuinely held, and purpose resonating with your authentic self rather than others' expectations. Everyone experiences betrayal in some form. Perhaps not as dramatically comprehensive as mine, but everyone eventually trusts someone who violates that trust, believes in something that proves illusory. It's woven into human experience. The question isn't whether you'll encounter betrayal, it's who you'll choose to become in its aftermath. I chose to become something better, more grounded, more honest, more compassionate. The betrayal could have rendered me permanently bitter, cynical, chronically suspicious, and temporarily it did. But eventually I recognized that maintaining those states meant granting Blake and Melissa continued influence over my life, outlook, and future contentment. Have you experienced profound betrayal? Remember this truth that ultimately saved me. Sometimes losing everything you thought defined you is the only path to discovering what genuinely matters. And what genuinely matters isn't status, possessions, or relationships that appear perfect externally. It's integrity, inner peace, authentic connection with yourself and others. That's something no one can take from you unless you surrender it willingly. And having lost it once through misplaced trust, I never will again.